Welcome to our YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in. Before we get started, we want to let you know of the ways to engage. So you can like, share, comment, and of course subscribe. Your participation is going to help us get this message out to those who need it. So welcome to the FTC family, and we hope you enjoy today's message.
Today, it is my privilege to speak to you in such a moment like today, December 2020, as we are experiencing so much around us.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord.
My title of my message today is a question for us. And that question is, do you believe? Do you believe today? Some background on my text that I'm going to be speaking on is from the book of Matthew chapter 9. But before I go into my text, I want to set the foundation for just a minute here. Matthew is one of the four gospels, the written record of Jesus from the perspective of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the disciples who walked with Jesus. The book of Matthew was written by Matthew, of course, but he was a Jew, and he was writing to the Jews. And we know that according to Matthew chapter 1. He starts out his chapter speaking about the genealogy of Jesus Christ, who was the Messiah. He goes on and breaks up this, and we see this in Matthew chapter 1, where he goes on to tie back this Jesus Christ, the Messiah, to the lineage of David. And in chapter 9 is the first time we record and we see somebody with identifying Jesus as the son of David. There had been miracles performed, and the crowds were flocking to this Jesus who had already proclaimed he was the Messiah, the Savior that had been promised from the Old Testament writings of the prophet Isaiah. And Jesus comes on the scene, and he was doing something different than what the religious leaders were doing. They would read from the Old Testament scriptures in the synagogues, and they would read about a deliverer who was to come to the Jewish nation. But Luke chapter 4, verses 14 to 21 records a different approach. And Jesus would go into the synagogue and he would read from the scrolls. And instead of just reading about a coming Messiah, he begins to read about himself. And in doing this, he was disrupting the traditions and of the religious way and life at this point. And he stood and he would read, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that the captives will be released, that the blind will see, and that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of the Lord's favor was to come and has come." And John chapter 9 tells us in verses 32 and 33, never before Jesus had the blind been healed to this point. Never before. And in chapter 9 alone of the book of Matthew, Jesus is returning to Capernaum by the Sea of Galilee, which is his hometown, after traveling the regions and performing miracles. We know that Jesus healed. It was him who healed a paralyzed man. It was Jesus who converted Matthew, who was ultimately the writer of this book of Matthew, who became one of his disciples. And while on his way to bring life to a young girl, the crowds were flocking to him. And Jesus healed a woman who had been bleeding for several years. He finally gets to the house of a ruler named Jairus and brings his 12-year-old daughter back to life. And we see a common thread of events here. People knowing scriptures and understanding that the Messiah was able to do what no one else can do till this point. And the Bible tells us that there were two blind men who were also locked in, who also had courage and belief and a desperation and a cry inside of them because they needed healing so that they can gain their purpose back in life. And the Bible tells us that Jesus departed the ruler's house And as he was passing through the town to another house, and as he was passing by, the blind men began to make their appeal to Jesus. And here we see a life-changing dialogue begin to happen, which is my key text for today. Matthew chapter 9, verses 27 through verse 30. And as Jesus passed on from there, two blind men followed him, crying aloud, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." When he entered the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said to them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" And they said to him, "Yes, Lord." Then he touched their eyes, saying, "According to your faith, be it done to you." And their eyes were opened. I don't know if you got that or if you caught that. But I don't know about you, but I don't really understand or really catch how two blind men followed Jesus. Two blind men who could not see followed Jesus. And there's three principles that we can take away from our key text today. Till this point, the blind had not been healed. And this was something prophesied, as I shared already, by Isaiah the prophet. But only those that were familiar with the scriptures understood this. Only those that knew about this Jesus who was to come, this Messiah that was to come to one day, he was the only one that was able to heal, to deliver, to bring back the sick from the dead, to heal the blind eyes. It was him that was going to be the only one. So they had to be connected. They had to be connected to the scriptures of that time. And they had to have some type of faith to know that if Jesus is in the town, if I can just get to Jesus, if I can follow Jesus, I can get my healing. Until this point, I believe we have had some similar experiences. I believe that there are spiritual and physical ailments that we are dealing with today. Sickness is real. Uncertainty is real. Everyone has been impacted in 2020. Everyone in some way or some fashion has been impacted in 2020. There are those who have suffered loss, been impacted by sickness, have experienced spiritual and emotional distress. We all have somehow, some way felt or feel like our faith has been tested. But I'm here to tell you today that God is able. God is able to heal our hearts, to heal our sicknesses, to give us back our sight for 2021. 2020, we may not have been able to see as clear. We may have got blurred by all the restrictions and the limits and the sickness and the ailments and disease and things that we have been touched with. But I'm here to tell you that we still have a God who is able to allow us to heal us, to let us see again. So let's take a little bit closer look. And I have 3 points I'm going to cover. First thing we see from these two blind men was that they had courage. Just because you and I may feel limited today doesn't mean it's over. And the two blind men had courage to reach their full potential. They could have had a setback with their inability to see, to steal their opportunity to be made whole. As they knew Jesus was in this town, as they knew where the source of their healing was coming from and could come from, they had a choice to make. They could have sat back and let Jesus walk on by, or they could have took action and built up some courage, even though they couldn't see where they were going, even though they couldn't see where he was going. They could hear him and they could somehow follow him, and it took courage. And today, if you're frustrated, if you're sick, if you're simply spiritually exhausted. I am praying that we grab hold of courage today. Courage to see that Jesus can and will and is able to turn everything around. But we have to recognize something. We have to recognize that the enemy targets our courage.
Amen.
He comes after our courage first. He'll always try to get our courage. That's why sometimes we get hit in the heart where our love is, where it hurts, where it's something close. If he can get to that courage that we have, you know what? That courage, I believe that if he can get to yours and mine and our courage, he can restrain every piece of faith that we have in us. If he can get to the courage that you and I have inside of us, I'm talking about that courage that allows us to stand up when we are weak. We can say we are strong because we depend on a God who is able. That courage. What happens when we lose courage? We settle for what we have, maybe, even when we know there is more. And the source, and even when we know the source that we can get more from. And you know what else happens when it gets to our courage? We don't have any fight in our spirits. You and I know if we can get our courage hit, if our courage can get hit, we will lose our fight. And if we lose our fight, we have no jump, we have no strength. We hang our hands down and we have no fight in our spirits, and that's where the enemy will try to keep us. And we limit our ability to reach our full potential. I'm trying to build up someone's courage today. We need courage to make a change. We need courage to face 2021. If we are believers and we have gifts and talents, we can become experts at many things. But experts don't always do the greatest things in life. Even some of the best spiritual examples had to have courage. It's the courageous that crossed over to the other side from a pain to promise. Don't let 2020 keep you from seeing your promise. God is still able. Joshua 1:6 says, the Lord told Joshua, you will lead many people. You will lead this nation of Israel across the Jordan to the land that I promise. You will lead them. You will lead them there, he says. And he gives him the instructions. And what's interesting to me about these instructions is he tells him, he just says in Joshua 1:6, he says, just be strong and courageous. He says, you don't need to be an expert. You don't need to be like Moses. You don't need to be like anyone in the past. Just be strong and courageous. And the blind men needed their vision back. They may have not been able to get to this point, but they needed courage to get to the source of their healing. They didn't settle to become part of the crowd. They didn't just sit back and stay back with all the crowd and let their healing pass on by. Their healing was going to come by them stepping out of the crowd and doing something a little bit different. They were courageous enough to identify this Jesus, who they called the Son of David. Have mercy on us. They identified. They said, look, they may be calling you Jesus, but I'm crying out, Son of David, have mercy on us. And that should have grabbed Jesus' attention right there. And courage, my second point, courage fueled their faith. Courage unlocks our faith to follow Jesus, even when it seems he is passing you by. It is courage that allows us to grab a hold of our faith, even when we feel like Jesus is slipping away from us. Even when we feel desperate and as if things are not going to change. The two blind men did something that was unconventional. They did something that we can learn from today. They didn't just sit back. There was a fight inside of them for their future. And I want to encourage Fountain of Truth Church today. Can we grab hold of some courage and build up our faith and get some fight back in our lives? Because God is able to do what is impossible for man, for you and I, for any doctor. It is only God that is able to do the impossible. It was God who was able to make these two blind men whole and complete again. There was something missing in their lives, and they knew this. They knew, you see, without their vision, they didn't know if they even had purpose. With their vision being gone, it's as if I'm gonna put a comma on my life sentence instead of a period. A comma is where you leave things undone and you wonder what it would ever be like, what my purpose would ever be like. But Jesus comes on the scene, and he comes and he wants to give them back their vision. And he's here today to give us back our vision, our purpose, our ability to cross over some challenges this year. There was a fight for their future. There was a compelling need. They needed to see their potential. And my third point, faith guided them to an intimate place. Sight was key for these men. And sight is key for everyone. This is our vision. This is how we see. And without vision, our ability to navigate this world physically and spiritually can change. I didn't say we can't navigate this world. I only said one's ability to navigate changes without vision. Physically speaking, medically speaking, it is believed that humans naturally compensate by relying on their other senses and hearing when one of the primary senses after their sight. However, the blind does not automatically make them better at hearing. Their advanced hearing is something they developed over time. The same thing can happen to those who still have the ability to see. What does that mean? Rearrange your house, turn your lights off, and try walking through the path that you used to walk, and your senses become heightened to where you place the furniture. After you bump into it for a little bit, after you have to move around, you begin to learn as you can't see, you begin to adjust. That's physically speaking. But spiritually speaking, these blind men had to use some senses that were uncommon. They had to rely on their faith to guide them. How do the two blind men end up inside the house? How did they end up inside the house? We can learn something about these two blind men. They couldn't see, but they followed him. And not only did they follow him, they went inside the house. You would think that their shout alone would have done it. Their shout alone of Jesus, of Son of David, have mercy on us, would have did everything they planned, everything they hoped for. You see, it's one thing for us to know of Jesus. It's one thing for us to know who this Jesus is. The crowds knew who Jesus was. But that didn't stop him for everyone. And sometimes we can identify Jesus as the source, but not have the courage or faith to keep following him when our life is impacted. You see, you and I are good at saying things like, Jesus, help me, Lord. God, I need you. Jesus, you are good. You are God. And he hears us. Yes, he does. We're real good at that. But sometimes God is looking for a quiet place with just you and him, with just me and him. A place where we can have an intimate moment. A place where I can get to know him and he can get to know me. Sometimes I believe and I wonder, should I say, if he passes us by just to see if we are willing to follow him just a little bit further. He could have healed them while he was passing by in the crowds, but he kept going to the house. And it wasn't until he got into the house that he turned to those two blind men, and they were right there by him inside his house, inside the house he was at. And it was there, verse 28 tells us, when he entered the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said to them, do you believe that I am able to do this? I want to know if you and I today, whatever our circumstances today, whatever that is, the need, I know there's so many. Today, my question to us all is, in December 2020, do you believe that he is still able? The paralyzed man would not have been able to experience his full potential if Jesus didn't heal him. His life would have been haunted by what could have been if the people didn't have courage and faith to present this need to Jesus. The woman with an issue of blood would have never known what it was like to be normal if she would not have had the courage and the faith to press through the crowds just to touch a piece of his clothing. Jairus, the ruler of a synagogue, his daughter would have been cut short to just 12 years of life if Jairus didn't bow down at the feet of Jesus and beg him and ask of him to go and heal his daughter. The two blind men needed something unique. They needed vision. They needed vision. Because vision was something that if it was left undone, they would be incomplete. And they would never have known what it would be like if they didn't have the courage and the faith to follow Jesus into an intimate place. If 2020 has you, if 2020 has you feeling incomplete, if you feel like you've lost purpose today, can we ask Jesus to have mercy on us and to help us to see again? Right where you are, in your living room, your kitchen, your bedroom, your office, wherever you are, if you can stand, I can't see you, we can't see you. But if you could stand today, there's some people that are feeling incomplete. There's some people that need to see hope again. There's some people that need to know that God is still able. And Jesus may be walking into your house, maybe walking into your bedroom, wherever you are right now. And he's seen that you followed him and you did take those extra steps. And for those that are not able or haven't been able to this point, I want to ask you, could you just take a few more steps and follow him into the house? And inside the house, he might be asking us right now, do you still believe? Do you believe that I am able? Do you believe that I am able? And if you and I can say today, like the two blind men said, yes, yes, I do. According to your faith, let it be done today. Let's lift our hands right now.
Thanks for watching. Your support is helping this channel stay updated. If you haven't already, we want to invite you to subscribe. And we want to thank you for your giving. Your giving has helped FTC reach the world. If you'd like to give today, please see the link in our description. Thanks again for watching.